All right. Well, thank you very much for coming to the Assembly Human Services Committee meeting. We do have a quorum. We'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Chu.
Here.
Mays.
Here.
Calderon. Lopez. Mainshine. Stone. Thurmond.
Here.
So we have our quorum.
Great. And we have only one bill here. Let's see. The bill number is 1405 by Assemblymember Grove. Assemblymember, you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd first like to say thank you to Maisha, our committee staff. I apologize for working so hard with my staff to make sure that we got the things down that were troublesome so that we could work on getting this bill through. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members. As many of you know, AB 1405 seeks to address an issue that has been very close to my heart for most of the time here in the legislature. I didn't even know what a developmental center was when I first started here, but as soon as I find out that these state-run, overpriced, archaic institutions failed year after year to fulfill their promise of the Latterman Act, it really bothered me. The Latterman Act guarantees people with developmental disabilities receive quality services that they deserve to help them reach their full developmental potential, while empowering them to live independently as possible in integrated communities of their choice. We all know this isn't happening within the state's developmental centers, and I'm glad that Governor Brown and the administration have set closure dates for the developmental centers. And because of that, I don't want to focus on how badly the DCs have been operated for years, but I do want to highlight some of the stuff that has happened because it is a shameful part of our history that we as legislators in the state must address. Both Sonoma and Fairview have been racked with abuse and deficiency in care. DC numbers have been declining since the 1960s, and the federal government is pulling funding from Sonoma Developmental Center because of its low standard of care. This puts California on the hook for tens of millions of dollars. The Department of Public Health documents have illuminated numerous cases of abuse, rape. 13 deaths have been occurred since this document was produced because of neglect and the lack of supervision within the DCs. There have been 36 cases of alleged rape with one child being produced. We need to put all this behind us, but we need to realize that the residents in the DCs still are vulnerable to abuse during this next 3 to 6 years till this timeline is actually achieved. A new death just happened at Fairview Developmental Center in Costa Mesa. A 50-year-old Kenneth Kohlfeldt was injured on February 13th and died 2 weeks later. Due to the suspicious details surrounding his death, the Orange County coroner is still investigating the cause of that death, and the cause of that death I was hoping would be available by the time this hearing took place, but it is not. I have asked Assembly Rules to approve a legislative investigation so that the Assembly can have all the details regarding Mr. Kohlfeldt's death. So we now need to look forward on what happens with these properties and assets, since the governor's put this closure date in his budget process, and what happens to the operating dollars devoted to the developmental centers and the remaining nearly 1,100 disabled individuals remaining in these DCs, costing about $500,000 a year each. At the same time, there are 288,000 people living with disabilities, like Richard. He's right here in the center. He's right there in the center. He actually came from a DC. He actually owns his own business now, which I think is pretty dang phenomenal when he used to be in a state-run institution, and now he has his own business, and he gets to go out and do that every single day because that's what he thrives to do. There's 288,000 people just like him that are living in the community, and like I previously mentioned, I'm very pleased with the governor about his D.C. closure date, and that's why I've incorporated the administration's closure dates in my bill. So now let's focus on the system-wide program that can be one of the most, that will help some of the most states, most vulnerable communities. The final question is over the concern for community funding. The community serving these developmental disabilities has been starved for funding for years. The one raise they did get in 2007 was taken back. We need to fund the system appropriately to keep the Latterman Act promise from helping the developmentally disabled live independent and productive lives in the community. We need to give certainty to the process of closure guarantee and make sure that we guarantee the funds to serve the population so that they can thrive in the community. And that's what this bill does. It helps better fund the developmentally disabled in the community by allocating funds from the lease and the properties to be redirected to community-based services or purchases services. And in closing, this bill will accomplish 3 goals. It'll help give land use control to local government so that the local governments and the local communities that are losing this asset as far as an employment process or anything will have the ability to retain that asset and to make sure that they have the ability to have a say-so in what happens to those assets. And then the 50% remaining funds will go to the Latterman Act to better fund the community programs and purchase of services. Ensure that Sonoma, D.C. is closed by 2018 and Fairview is closed by 2021, which again are in the governor's proposed budget in the May revise. I want to reconfirm my commitment to the D.C. community that health, safety, and the needs of and the goals of the residents, according to their IPP, is my utmost concern. And as this bill moves forward, I hope it does, I'll continue to work with DDS to ensure a proper plan is in place to find better homes for these former D.C. residents. And again, I want to thank committee staff. I personally went over and saw her, and she was just wonderful in helping me with this. I have Jackie Dillard Foss from STEP and Lydia Eldenborough. Her son was actually in Sonoma, and he's not here. His name is Olaf, but David was his caregiver, or is his caregiver, and they're both going to testify for the bill.
Thank you. So the witnesses that are supporting this bill, please come forward. We will allow 3. Yeah, three witnesses.
Mr. Chair, we had a third witness that was going to be here, but his name is Larry Ingram, his brother Bon Ingram. It's a huge story that has been plagued over the years, but he is not here, but I provided you with his signed written statement.
Okay, great.
May I?
Thank you.
Yes, over here. Why don't we go?
We will accept the written script and open for 3 public testimony. So.
Yes. I don't know. No. Support. Sorry. Okay, support. Yeah. So I provided that list. I provided that signed declaration.
Great. Thank you very much. We will accept that, and we will open up for 3 testimony this afternoon. Please go.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jackie Dillard Foss, and I am the CEO of the STEP program here locally in Sacramento that supports 350 individuals with intellectual disabilities. I've also been fortunate to assist 35 people moving from the developmental centers. And since the governor's proposed closure plan, what I've been really considering as a provider is what are the things that need to be done. So the first thing I looked at was currently within our system, if a person's been in a developmental center 20 or 30 years, what we know is we have a plethora of assessments. We have medical assessments, psychological assessments. That person has had assessment after assessment after assessment through that whole process. So when we review those assessments and we develop a plan, what we want to develop is an individualized plan to meet the needs of that person. Each person that you meet is going to be different. I have people that are deaf blind, people that have dual diagnosis, people that have a forensics background. So you tell me what diagnosis, and generally I can tell you I have people that I support that have physical disabilities as well. It's all based on the individualized need. Do I think that process takes 2 years? No. I think that the process can be with a team that is really in collaboration and working together with an end in mind. You can see the person move out effectively within a 6-month period of time. Obviously, the biggest challenges we have as a provider once the assessment or the review of assessments is completed is hiring the staff and housing. I mean, in supported living, housing is a big struggle. If you're in the Bay Area, my fellow providers in the Bay Area, what do they struggle with? Housing. So those are issues that when we look at the developmental center land and as a provider community, as we struggle, we're going, okay, there's a great struggle within our community to hire and retain qualified employees, and most of the employees that leave are not leaving because they don't want to do the job. They're leaving because they can't afford to do the job because the pay is so abysmal. So I think if we can address the direct support professional and really recognizing that P in the direct support side of what they're doing, if we can recognize the assessment process, and if we say a person's been in a developmental center for 20 years and we don't have assessments done, then what has been going on for those 20 years? That's a long time for someone not to have really solid assessment plans in place. When they transition from the community, that's a big difference, trying to figure out what their individualized needs will be once they transfer there. So I just want to say this can and has and continues to be done daily. I just moved a gentleman out 3 months ago. He was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. We put together the oncologist. We put together the team. He now lives in his own duplex. The things he loves to do the most, his name is Han, he loves to Swiffer. He has discovered Swiffering is the most enjoyable thing in his life. We're like, you don't need to Swiffer the floor again, Han. But it's a pleasure for him. He does dishes. He's like, this is cool. I can do my own dishes. I can Swiffer the floor. It's really for us. I mean, I wish I would love to Swiffer as much as Han does, because I don't. But if you figure out within our community, sometimes the simplest things that you are not allowed to do, and once you can do, become the greatest joy. So that's my testimony, is it can be done. It is being done. This community does it. We do it well. We should be recognized for our professionalism. So I appreciate Assemblymember Grove's passion. And we all know how passionate she's been about our community. Jerome, all the time he sees her, and he's like, oh, that's that lady. So he knows she's very passionate about him living in a developmental center, his abuse that occurred, and the life that he's living now. So thank you for your time.
Lydia.
Thank you.
I'm nervous.
It's okay, don't be nervous.
My name is Lydia Edinburgh, and I'm the mother of a developmentally disabled son, Olaf, who suffers from congenital rubella syndrome. Olaf lived ages of 9 to 22 at Napa State Hospital, and it was with his left eye being put out that we were able to get the services from STEP and get him out of that situation. He has the best life. Olaf decides where he wants to live, where he works. He's legally blind and doesn't have one eye, and he does landscaping. Loves anything remote control. And he likes quiet time by himself as well. I have seen Olaf grow, and he's grown to such a point that with the services from STEP, I no longer worry what would happen if I pass. I'm 60. Olaf is 40. We keep getting older. And Olaf has been receiving services from STEP for the past 18 years.
Nervous moms. See? She did a good job.
Good job. Carl.
And I believe so much in STEP that I've worked, while I was working a full-time job, I also worked part-time for STEP. So I worked 12-hour days for 16 years. And since I retired from the U.S. Attorney's Office, I'm now working full-time at STEP. I want to make an impact in the lives of all our clients or employers, and not just be touching one life at a time.
Can I just clarify something? When Lydia says employer, one of the Dr. Ruth Myers, who is a neuropsychiatrist who's extraordinary in her field, she once said, Jackie, if you want to change the way people see people with intellectual disabilities, call them what they are. They are our employers. We are paid by them to do a service for them. So the people within our agency, they know I am only their employee, and I'm at their behest of them. They hire, they fire. They hire and fire all the people that are in their lives, regardless of level of intellectual disability. That's pretty extraordinary when you see someone with an intellectual disability that's deaf and blind, and they're one of the better supervisors. I wish I could get some of my paid supervisors as strong a supervisor. When a person knows they have power, everything changes.
Great, thank you.
Carl.
And we do have a third witnesses, please.
Witness.
Want me to go ahead?
Mr. Chairman and members, Carl London here on behalf of the California Disability Services Association. We are a organization of approximately 100 community-based agencies that serve this population on a daily basis, providing a broad range of services. This bill is important on a couple levels, and it is interesting that May Revise saw the governor come out with a strong position on closure of the developmental centers. We're grateful for that. We think it's the right thing to do, and I wanted to point out, at least on that level, in terms of the numbers we're talking about, I passed out a document to you that shows how many people left the developmental centers according to the past.
Let me interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
Move this item if I can. Move the bill. Second.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
The important thing to note here, if you look over the past and recent history of any 3-year cycle we've had in our state budget, we've pretty much been able to move more people out of the developmental centers than remain currently at Sonoma and Fairview developmental centers, which this bill addresses. It's an easy thing to do. It's not easy in that everybody has specific needs, but it's easy in terms of the number. We do this all the time. We've done it for the past several years. This can be done, as Jackie mentioned, quite readily. The other thing that this bill does, though, that's even probably more important, and Mr. Thurman, I know, is intimately familiar with this, given the past budget process that we've had. This bill develops a policy statement on what happens to funding that currently goes to the developmental centers as they fade away, and also looks at the properties and assets. In the past history of developmental centers, in my lifetime as a lobbyist, we've closed Stockton Developmental Center, Camarillo State Hospital, which became CSU Channel Islands. We've closed Agnew's, and this last year we've closed Lanterman. And in every case, the community never received any benefit from that, even though we were disproportionately saving the state money by moving people from the developmental centers, where the costs are quite high, into community-based programs, which are very efficient. We didn't get the benefit of the property and assets that were left behind, and we got absolutely no benefit from the operations dollars that suddenly just went right back into the budget. What Ms. Grove has done here is set forth, I think, a pretty landmark policy that says no more of that. It says that these assets that have been dedicated for years and years, decades really, in serving people with developmental disabilities should be looked at in a way to help fund the community and their transition in the community, and not just for the remaining 1,000 people that are left in developmental centers, but for the 280,000 that we attempt to serve every day. In that way, the bill doesn't propose an increase. It doesn't, in terms of what the state's obligation is, but it rather sets forth a priority that this community deserves our attention. And the other document I passed out to you is a document that shows what the 12 recent most state budgets look like for this population. You'll see that, as Ms. Grove pointed out, one rate increase, 2006-07, was the only rate increase that the legislature and governor have given in the last 12 state budgets to this community. Meanwhile, the cost of living went up 30% during that time period. So where does the money come from? This bill helps address that and looks at it and makes an important policy statement on that issue in terms of how we treat the assets, the property, and the operations dollars going forward in a way that will help to continue to serve this community just as it's done for decades and decades. And for those reasons, we're in strong support of this bill and would urge your aye vote.
Great. Thank you very much. Was there any additional witnesses? Please come forward and state your name and your affiliation. Thank you.
Greg DeGier with the ARC and United Cerebral Palsy California Collaboration, a coalition of people with intellectual and all developmental disabilities and their families, friends, and service providers. And it takes longer to say that than it takes to say that we support the bill.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Alice Reynolds, and I'm a client of this day program. And years ago, when I was waiting for my bus on Chester Avenue, there was this alley next to my bus stop, and I heard this noise, this commotion. So I looked inside. Now, what I saw was a whole bunch of men, and they were fighting. And they had this one man, and he was pinned against the wall. Now, my heart went out to him, but my brother said, Al, you shouldn't have done it. I walked into it. Now, nothing happened to me because all these men that were fighting, they knew where I wanted to go. I walked up to this man, and I put my arm on his shoulder, and I said, Sir, are you all right? He looked at me funny, did a double take, and said he was, but I knew different. Then they all took off, and I never saw those men again. But to this day, I'm trying to fight for these day programs, but in a nice way. We need them. She is just a wonderful person. To this day, I have anxiety attacks. That fight scared me. And to this day, I have anxiety attacks about going out into the public by myself. I have to be with groups of people or in these homes. And these day programs are helping me. We need to have these programs very much. I'm a client of one of these programs.
Thank you very much. I know there's a lot of touching story, but again, I'd like to limit the additional testimony by just stating your name and the affiliation. I appreciate that.
My name is Mason Sisson. I'm a DSP with a supported living agency here in Sacramento. I'm in support of the developmental closures. Thank you.
I'm former Assemblywoman Dion Ehrener. And Mr. Chu, I actually sat in your seat for many years as chair of this committee, and I'm one of the people that's been involved for a long time in proposing closures of the developmental centers. If it's okay, I just wanted to address a couple of the issues in the consultant's analysis. Right, one of them is in regards to, if with permission of the chair.
Yes, for the former members, yes.
Great, thank you so much. There's an issue in regards to the special services that are provided at the developmental centers, and they always mention the man is now a woman. It used to be a man who made the special shoes for everybody at Sonoma, and also the wheelchair people. I think we need to start looking at that group of people as a much broader group of people, in that there are many specialists that are in the developmental centers that we want to have come out into the community to provide services to the other 280,000 people that are in need of those services. And so there are some ideas out there in regards to how to do that and how to attach them either to centers of excellence or whatever it is. And I'm hoping that Ms. Grove will consider that as she moves the bill through the legislature. So that's the first point. The second point is I'm also hoping that she will amend the bill so that we will include the people in front of the fence at Porterville. That's been the discussion all along. There are, I can't remember the number, less than 200 people at Porterville in front of the fence, meaning that they're not there for forensic purposes, and they should also be included in the bill because they're also included in the governor's proposals. And then thirdly, in regards to the statements made regarding the people in the developmental centers might have more extraordinary needs than people in the community, that's never been found to be an accurate statement. Of the 280,000 people that are in the community, they reflect the people that are in the developmental centers, and so there's no reason to believe that we can't provide the services to the people as they come out of the developmental centers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Evelyn Abu Hassan with Disability Rights California. We are in support of the developmental center closure. We also support a robust community system that's going to be able to address the needs of individuals as they move out. I agree with Ms. Aroner's comment about the non-forensic population. We should look at that and address that. And finally, we need to ensure that the transition process is one that's thoughtful as we look at moving people out and putting them into the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm multitasking. My name is Jerome. My last name is Nash, or Murray. Used to be Murray. The hospitals? I don't like it. I don't like the hospital at all. I like STEP, and I like to go to work, and I like my landscaping.
Great. Thank you, Jerome. And next.
Good afternoon. My name is Stacy Sasson. I'm a director of community resources at a local supported living agency here in Sacramento. I've been in this field for about 12 years, and before that I was a supervisor social worker at in-home supportive services for Sacramento County. And I just want to say that I've seen for a very long time now how well community services support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Mm-hmm. And I've seen in my current work how easily we can transition people from the DCs to the community. We've done so in 30, 60 days when we've had to rush and do things. And is it optimal? No, it's not, but we do it and we do it well. We have people with significant medical needs, significant behavioral needs, and there's no one in the DCs that has any kind of diagnosis that we don't have here in the community by the thousands. So I support AB 1405. I thank the Assemblywoman for her hard work for this population. And thank you.
Hello, my name is Ashley Music, and I'm from Bakersfield. I attend the CCA branch of NAPD, and I support and thank Shannon Grove for her bill, because we need all the help we can get, because there's not much out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the witnesses in support. Any opposition? In opposition, please come forward. It will allow 3 testimonies. Please go ahead. And at this point, I want to mention that we have a motion by Mr. Mays and second by Mr. Manshine. So
Good
go ahead.
afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Doug Chiapetta on behalf of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, here representing the Union of American Physicians and Dentists. As someone who has somewhat of a historical perspective here as well, having served as an advocate on behalf of the physicians and dentists going on 15 years now. So yes, I was here for the closure of Agnews. Yes, I was here for the closure of Landerman, and here for these deliberations. A couple of quick observations. The clinicians who treat these individuals are very much partners in their treatment plan and want to see them assimilate into the community. What essentially has gone on for the past decade and a half, the developmental centers have been stripped of all the services and support staff. But more importantly, the only patients that remain within these facilities are the ones who essentially have been deemed not appropriate for community placement in the eyes of their clinical staff, be it the physicians and dentists. In particular, dentistry is a very difficult profession to master with regard to patients. It's hard to get a patient who has been within a developmental center to trust a clinical person, and be it dentistry or be it clinical psychology, psychiatry, or mental health, or just actual medicine. It's a collaborative effort, and there's a partnership there. So by no means are we coming here and trying to say we essentially oppose the closure. We have, worked with Ms. Aaron and others over the years. What I can tell you is this. The Agnews closure plan had a benchmark. It was moved several times. There was no provision for outpatient services. The closure plan was augmented numerous times. With regard to Landerman, a closure plan was established, yet there's still mortality in the community. So the one thought I would leave you with is that the clinical types and the state workers that represent those clinical types who are here in consensus, we want to see the most appropriate placement for those individuals in the community. However, if it's not appropriate for them, we must strongly oppose this legislation because we do not think it's appropriate for placement. Final point. This closure plan, a targeted date is in the governor's budget for 2018. This is a duplicative effort. However, it's not identical because this bill actually closes the door and has a drop-dead date on the developmental centers. The governor is doing it in a more thoughtful way and incrementally looking at this with a target date of 2018, which probably will move for a couple of times given augmentations to the budget and so forth and so on. For these reasons, we strongly oppose. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Randy Cheek with SEIU Local 1000. We represent a lot of the workers at the developmental centers. We understand the governor's plan to close the developmental centers, but we also believe that a drop-dead date that is in this legislation is unrealistic. As Mr. Chiapetta noted, that both the closures of Agnews and Landerman took longer than 2 years. It took a number of years because people have to have their individual plans made out because they have special needs, they have special issues, they have special care that they need medically. The 2 years is just an unrealistic plan. We also believe that we should follow the task force that was created by Diana Dooley, which called for special placements in that can't be made in the community, so that there is a place for people to go. The plan called for a center down south and one up north for acute care and special nursing facility. Neither of these bills carry that information. We think that's important and that should be part of a proper closure. We understand that these are going to close. We want to make sure, my members want to make sure that the people that they care for are being taken care of and get the proper care that they need. So for this reason, we are opposed of this legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members, I'm Kobe Pizzati with California Association of Psychiatric Technicians. We are the largest direct level care providers inside the developmental centers. Many of our members have worked with the individuals there for 30 plus years. They've become family to these people. What I've heard from my members time and time again, the 2018 language that is actually in the budget, has been adopted and is into the budget. It is contradictory to what Ms. Grove's language says. It's goals. It's a goal set in place in the budget. Ms. Grove is hard and fast language in her bill. That means effectively you could potentially pass something on Monday that is going to be contradictory to something that you could pass today. So that's one provision. Then you have a secondary provision that states 50% of the revenues, the sales or of the property or lease revenues from developmental center closures would be given to the community for resources to develop supports and what have you. What happens if none of this actually transpires? What if Sonoma Developmental Center never gets sold or never gets leased or becomes part of a joint venture program to do certain housing? Same thing with Fairview. What if it never actually gets happened or gets done? Then you still have $0 going into the community, which you're hoping to accommodate with this bill. So with that, I would just like to keep it brief and say that this bill is duplicative in what it's doing in the idea that it's trying to close things down. But you're trying to kick people out of a developmental center in a hard and fast deadline when that's not the appropriate way to do this. You have to have goals to make sure that people can move safely into the community. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, other members, Paul Yoder, Shaw Yoder, Antwi on behalf of the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors. Very, very briefly, the Sonoma Board of Supervisors cares about the residents at the SDC, but also about the workers there and about the land that the SDC sits on. We have to align ourselves with the administration on this. The administration needs more flexibility than is in this bill. The administration is dealing one-on-one with the Obama administration, and I think that's just the proper place for this to be, and the state budget is the proper place for this issue to be decided. We have a lot of respect for the author, but I just, in closing, will say one of the witnesses in support said that some of the issues that could be encountered have to be dealt with in a closure are housing prices and labor prices in the San Francisco, the greater Bay Area. Well, that's where the SDC is located. It's exactly where the SDC is located. So we need a goal, not anything that's more strict than that, that just slams that door shut, as one of the previous witnesses testified. Thank you. Urge your no vote.
Thank you very much. Any additional opposition? Please come forward and state your name and your affiliation, please.
Mark Victoria, ASME Local 2620, representing many different clinicians along with our allies here that were at the table. We are in strong opposition to this bill due to many of the reasons that were already spoken of earlier, which are, this is a hard, fast deadline, which when you're dealing with such a vulnerable population, we need to make sure that these issues are thought out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Brian Early on behalf of Sonoma Land Trust would like to echo the comments made earlier that the health and safety and care of those residents currently at SDC should be our number one priority. We believe it's very premature for the legislature to step in and appropriate hypothetical lease revenue. Would also like to reiterate that SDC is an invaluable community asset that provides valuable care for those people on site, but is also a 750-acre large wildlife corridor. So definitely don't think it is appropriate for the legislature to step in, and we would like to leverage a community process that has just started to talk about potential reuse for the site.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation. For the reasons previously stated, we're also in opposition. It's an especially vulnerable population. We need to make sure that their health is taken care of and that their safety and that their needs are considered as this process moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional witnesses come forward? Now we're going to be open for members' questions. Any members have any questions?